Okie dokie. Okay, welcome to our weekly Parsha class. And this week we are in an act of kindness, and it concludes also with an act of kindness. The first story in the Torah is what is God acting to people kindly is when Adam and Eve realized that they need clothes. And the Torah tells us specifically in the verse, in the beginning of Bereshit, Vayas Hashem Elokim le'adam not or that God leather jackets, and the Torah tells us there is a concept of God dressing the naked. Mal b'sharum. Welcome. This is the beginning of Bereshit. What is the end of the Chumash? What is the end of the entire Chumash? The last story is the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, and the Torah tells us, "Vayigbor oto bagai," that God buried Moshe on the top of the mountain. We don't know exactly which mountain, but the top of a mountain. So the beginning of the Torah, God is involved in dressing the naked. In the end of the Torah, God is involved in burying the dead. So the Talmud makes the following observation. Dorash Rab Simloi expanded on that, and he said, the Torah begins with discussing Gemilut Chasadim, acts of kindness. The Torah concludes with discussing Gemilut Chasadim, acts of kindness. This is coming to allude that in the Torah, in its entirety, from beginning till end, it's all wrapped with the same message, the message of Chesed. Good evening. The message of Chesed. Torah is speaking about Chesed, Gemilut Chasadim. Matter of fact, there is a very ancient sage with the name of Rabbi Yehuda Hasid, and he actually writes in his book called Sefer Hasidim, that's the name of the book, he writes that the word Torah, which is 607, is the same numerical value of the Hebrew word for acts of kindness called Gemilut Chasadim. Counted out, Gemilut Chasadim, I checked it out, by the way. And not that I didn't trust them, I just wanted to make sure that I have the numbers right. Torah and Gemilut Chasadim, the word Torah and the words for acts of kindness actually share the same gematria, the same numerical value. So I saw in a letter, in a footnote of a letter that the Rabbi writes to our organization, I'm going to discuss it later, but it was a Hebrew free loan organization called Shomrei Shabbat in New York. He writes them a letter for a fundraiser or Melave Malka event, a gathering that they had in honor of the organization. And it was at the Motzei Shabbat, the end of Shabbat, Mishpatim, this week's Parsha. So the Rebbe says in that footnote, just one liner, he references to that Gemara, which is in Tractate Sota, page 14, that I just mentioned. And the Rebbe says, just like the entire Torah begins with chesed, with kindness, and ends with kindness, so too is Parshat Mishpatim. You have to remember, this week's Parsha is the first Parsha, the first major Parsha after standing at Sinai, after receiving of the Torah. And this Parsha contains many, many laws. Matter of fact, the name of the Parsha is Mishpatim. The word Mishpatim means rules and laws, because this is what the Parsha mainly deals with. There is over 50 positive and negative mitzvot mentioned in this week's Parsha. And many of them center around, especially in the relationship that one has with the other. You cause some injuries to another person, if you cause some damages to someone else's property, your obligations, your responsibilities. Somebody stole from somebody else, how does he pay? Depends what he stole. There is double payment, sometimes there is 4 or 5 times the amount. There is a lot of laws by learning this week's Parsha Mishpatim, which is actually associated with the concept of mitzvot, mainly between people. Here too, the Rabbi points out very beautifully in a short footnote, the Parsha begins with kindness and it ends with kindness to teach us, like the Gemara teaches us about the entire Torah, that the Torah is all about acting kind. What is the first mitzvah in the book of Mishpatim, in this week's Parsha? A slave. But what does the Torah speak about a slave? The Torah tells us the first mitzvah in this week's Parsha is, and all the 50 mitzvot plus, the first mitzvah is when you are purchase a slave, and when is a Jew able to purchase another Jew as a slave, is mainly when this other Jew had stolen someone else's money and he couldn't pay it back because it was poor. So the court gives him an opportunity to pay back his fine by selling himself to slavery. You can imagine how many people will buy themselves a slave, which is a convicted fellow who was who was arrested for stealing. But let's say it was difficult times, called difficult measures, and he's actually a nice person, which he ended up stealing. And now he's working for you. The Torah says you can only keep him for 6 years. 7th year, you got to let him free. You don't have any right to honor more than that. And even if he says, I want to stay, no, I'm sorry. You got to go home. You got to start living your own life. We're not letting you remain a slave for the rest of your life. This is, I believe, a presentation of kindness towards people. Understanding the idea that a person essentially is free and you don't keep him tied up for more than a very temporary period.
If you really call it slavery, it's indentured servitude.
No, it's slavery. He works for you as a slave. Basically, all the conditions which the legal system will require a slave to do, that's what he's going to do. It's not an employee.
No, but there's something called indentured servitude where you have to pay off various debts by working.
No, so not that. This is becoming a person's property. A person's property. And that's why you only keep it for a fixed amount of time. The way you describe it, it's, it's a job which comes in for a couple hours, which people do, or for more than a couple hours.
You stay with that person.
Exactly. Okay, so could be there is some slight difference, I'm not sure, but the idea is that
complete their obligation in 3 years and be let go on.
Right, but he only stays to the
Or
second
10 years.
But the point is, there is a cut of how much we let you work. The word is, we're not letting a person stay a slave forever. That's the bottom line. And that's called chesed, the kind look on humanity. This is the beginning of Mishpatim. The end of Mishpatim is again kindness. But here is a little tricky. Where do you find kindness in the end of Mishpatim? The end of this week's Parsha, the last chapter, actually goes back to a story which we discussed last week. If you want to know what happened at Sinai, you can't rely on what you read in Parshat Yitro. Because Parshat Mishpatim, the end of Mishpatim, there's an old chapter which goes back and shares with us a lot of information. This is chapter 24 in Mishpatim, shares a lot of information of that which took place in Sinai before the Torah was given. It's mentioned here, Rashi says, because the Torah does not always record things in their chronological order. But chapter 24 is a part of the story of the giving of the Torah and the way the Torah is presented. And mainly, finally, Moshe is being called up to come up to the mountain to receive the tablets, the luchot, and the rest of the Torah. And the last verse of this Parsha is the following verse. Vayovoi Moshe betoich eonon. Moshe arrived in the midst of the cloud. Vayal Elohor, and he ascended the mountain. Vayehi boho Moshe boho. Moshe stayed on the mountain. Arboim yoim v'arboim laila, 40 days and 40 nights. And Rashi tells us that this cloud is obviously the cloud which follows the verse preceding it. What does it say in the preceding verse, on verse 17? That God is on the mountain. Umare kvoid Hashem, the appearance of the glory of Hashem, ke'esh oicheles b'roi shor, like a consuming fire, not just a fire, a consuming fire. You can have a fire, you can have a consuming fire. When you light oil, there is really smoke, right? Because we don't consume something tangible. Something delicate gets burned out, and then there's no smoke. Here, the mountain was a consuming fire, and that consuming fire created a cloud. What kind of cloud? Rashi says the cloud was kemin ashan. It was kind of smoke. So now there's a very, very heavy smoked mountain that Moshe is entering to meet God. The last 4 words of Rashi is, from the Gemara, Ve'asalo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe shvil betocho. And God created for Moshe in the Smoky Mountain a shvil. What's a shvil? A path that he can walk through that mountain without being affected by the smoke. Meaning, going up the smoke, even if you are protected, and you, Moshe came up by God's call, so he came on a mission, so we can assume that God made sure he doesn't get burned down by the fire, obviously, because that's what he wants from him, to remain alive and to exist. So he's ensuring and protecting him from being burned. But the smoke is not going to impact him physically, but it will definitely impact his face, impact his clothes. He's going to look all verschmutzt, as they say. So God acts extra kindly to Moshe, and he makes sure that he has a proper appearance, so he can look presentable when he meets up with Hashem. So Torah begins with Chesed and it ends with Chesed. In this week's Parsha, like I said, there is many mitzvot. Going with that spirit, I would like to concentrate on one of the 50 plus mitzvot in this week's Parsha, and this is actually a mitzvah which acts to do specifically with acting kindly, with chesed. The pasuk is in Chumash, chapter 22, verse 24. And the Chumashim here that we have with you is page 430, the last verse of 431 in the English. Says the Torah, Im kesef talve es ami. When you lend money to my people, esa'oni imach, to the poor person who is with you, loi si eloi ke noishe. Do not act towards them as a creditor. Loi sasimun olav neshech do not lay interest upon him. Meaning, if you give him a loan, it has to be what we call a free loan. Continuing more, if you take your fellow's garment as a security for the return of the loan, until sunset shall you return it to him. Basically, you have for him to keep it a whole day. It's his garment. So a whole day till sunset, he keeps it. The borrower, sunset, you knock on his door and he said, okay, now you don't need it. I want my security back. Now that you don't need it, I want my security deposit. Give me the garment. Why? Says the Torah. But this garment is clothing. It is the garment for his skin. In what should he lie down? Which means there is the robe, and this includes also if there is, let's say, bed work that he needs for the night, like his pillow, his blanket, that you give it back to him at night. And you take next morning, you knock on his door and you collect it back from him. He eats a keli, but he's going to cry out to me that he doesn't have a pillow to sleep with. The borrower says, I don't have a pillow, I don't have my kapot, my suit to go to the market. Shomaiti, I'm going to have to listen to him. I'm a God of compassion, I'm a compassionate God. Gmach, it is called in Hebrew. The acronym of Gmilus Chasod. Gmilus Chasod. If you, in a so-called Jewish religious community, today's day and age, you can find any type of gmach, any type of lending society. If you got stuck without diapers and your child needs to change diapers and the stores are closed in Jerusalem, in Bnei Brak, in Borough Park, you can knock on someone's door who, in the community bulletin board, they are lending out diapers. And then eventually you buy new ones when the store is open and give it back to them so they can lend it to somebody else. I remember we came to Israel first time or second time with my children. One of them was a baby, whether it's Levi or Sorla. They were all attached to their saucifiers. You know? Schmutchkers. And pacifier. And somehow, like it often happens, the pacifier gets lost. You look here and there, and you know the tragedy of a child with a lost pacifier, you don't want to experience. I don't wish it even my enemies. This is Gehenna. And it's night, and we have nowhere to go buy a pacifier, and there's no pacifier to be found. And then my mother reminds us of actually up the street, there's somebody who they lend pacifier. I walked up to that house. The lady opens up the door. Yes, she has a whole, what color does your child like? Pink, yellow, does it like a heavy, whatever, stickle, a small little chupchik, a big one. La Yehudi Moisahiro. Thank God. The medicine people somehow, and they don't have the refill, they're like, there's gmachim for everything. Next to my grandmother's house, who she lived, but Beliba's house, there was a couple, Rabbi Cohen and his wife, Avram Erish and Rivka Cohen, very special couple. The children were my head of yeshiva, my Hasidic mentor. And they had a small apartment, like all these little apartments on the Mea Sharim street called Batei Varsh. But she had a gmach. She also had a lending organization. She lended out tables and benches for those who need. If they have a simcha, you have a Shabbos, you have more guests. People used to have that 3-4 chairs. So there she used to have, it wasn't like she had a small house, and she had like inside, like big boards with some metal parts. You take 2 metal parts and you put the board on top, and that's a table. another metal part and another board, it becomes the bench. People used to come borrow for Simchas. I remember many times going to pick up some of the grandmother, and there was a Simcha in the house, a breed. This is the mitzvah story. A story that the previous Rebbe writes, the Rebbe records it too. The story is actually about the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he was very, very close, extremely close to his grandfather. He was actually raised by his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, because his mother's name was Boraleya. Boraleya, when the Alter Rebbe was in jail, she made a commitment that she gives her life so the Hasidim can get back their Rebbe. And she passed away. And he was raised as a young child by Zayda, the Alter Rebbe. That was the house he grew up until he married his uncle's daughter, the Mittler Rebbe's daughter. He was a son-in-law of the Mittler Rebbe. He married Chaya Mushka. Actually, his name was Menachem Mendel, and his wife was Chaya Mushka, just like our Rebbe, which was the same name, and his wife carried the same. So he had the ability to see visions and to basically see his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, even after his grandfather passed away. And somehow was able to experience them and communicate with them. And then as the story goes, that there was a time that Tzemach Tzedek was sitting in his room and he's learning. And he has already for a few days a number of questions. And he can't make up his mind. He can't resolve those difficulties. He's eager and anticipating, if I can only see my Zayda, and he will resolve for me all those difficulties, but the Zayda didn't appear to him. Next morning, the Tzemach Tzedek is a young man, he's married, and he goes to pray Shacharit at the synagogue of his father-in-law, who was the Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe. He goes by, and he had to walk through the market. As he walks by the market, comes over to him one of the market people, the Rebbe brings his name was Mordechai Eliyahu, Mordechai. Comes over and he says, he was a simple man, a God-fearing Jew, and he says, look, it is market day, and I don't have any money to buy something in order to sell. That's what we do at the market. He's asking the Tzemach Tzedek if he can give him a loan. I need a ruble till tonight, and next morning I'm going to make something in the market and give it back to you. So Tzedek said, after davening, I'm on my way to shul. After davening, I'm going to come home and come to my house. I will give you the loan. So Tzedek walks into shul. He takes his talit, he's about to start davening. Then remember the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, a person should give charity to a poor person before davening, like it says in the pasuk, Ani betzedek echezeh panecha, esbe'a be'akitz tmunatecha. Let me see your face with righteousness. Let me give tzedakah, and then I'm going to come meet God. And then I remember that the Gemara tells us in Sukkah that lending to a needy person is even greater than just charity. The Gemara says charity is to the poor. Lending is to the poor and to the rich. Everybody needs a loan. The Rambam says clearly that the greatest level of charity is assisting someone with a loan. So he's going to be able to organize his own life. Besides the fact that when you give him a loan, he's unembarrassed to take it. I'm not taking anything, I'm not begging, I'm just taking a loan. I mean, little does he know, but anyway, but usually a loan, I'm going to return it and take a loan, and the loan you invest and you are able to start your own. The Rambam says this is the highest level of stuff, highest. The Tzemach Tzedek is thinking about all this, it all comes to him in mind, and says, why did I tell this person to wait till after davening. He needs it now. Hey, the stalis leaves it on the table. He goes back home, and he brings the money, and comes to the market. The market is already packed, and he's looking for Mordechai, trying to find them. Till he finally finds them, he gives them the loan. He goes back to shul. As he walks into shul, and there he sees again the vision of his Zayda, the Alter, and he helps him resolve all his challenges. And he hears, that's what he writes, he hears that the Alter Rebbe is telling him, which what the previous Rebbe writes, he hears that the Alter Rebbe is telling him, with a smiley face, lending money to another person, with a full heart, a complete heart, doing a favor for another Jew. All the gates of heaven are becoming open for you. That's the story. Let's go and delve in for a moment into this verse. Let's see how sense we can make to this verse. The verse begins in Hebrew, Im kesef talveh sami. What does im mean in Hebrew? If. Usually when it says if, it's optional. If you want, you do it. If you don't want, you don't do it. The Gemara tells us there are 3 times in the Torah which the word if, usually if means optional. There are 3 times which if does not mean optional. If means it's obligatory. Rashi brings it in. This is one of the 3. It doesn't mean if you lend money, but rather you should lend money. So the commentaries are asking, so if it's not if, if it's not if it means that you should actually do it, so why does the Torah introduce it with the word if, im? Say, kesef, talveh, sami, you have an obligation to lend money. What is it if? And then it says, talveh et ami. If you lend money to who? To my people, to my nation. Am I lending money to the people of God? Or am I lending money to an individual? You lend money to the people, who is paying you back? One of the people one of the people is coming to ask for a loan, right? So what is the meaning in kesef talveh et ami? If you would lend money to my mission, as if the whole nation needs a loan, and when you do it, make sure you don't act as a credit. And then the third part of the verse, Esa'ani imach, the poor person who is with you. What do you mean with you? What do you mean? What are you attaching this poor person to me? He has to be with me. He has to live with me. He has to stay with me. He has to eat cholent with me. What makes him the poor person who is with me? So the commentaries are sharing a lot of interesting stuff. One of them is our famous sage, Chacham, Rabbeinu Chaim ben Attar, known as the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the Holy Orach Chaim, writes on this week's Parsha. He says there are 2 types of people. He says there is the people which have what they need. Thank God, they go to work, they provide for their families, and they have whatever they need. There are those who have more than what they need. They have more to what they need. They pay their mortgage, they pay their bills, they pay their tuition, they buy their groceries, they give their contribution, they pay their dues, and there's still, Baruch Hashem, more money. What is the reason? What should they do with that money? Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, God tells you, if you have more money, it means that I'm expecting you to lend it to those who are less fortunate than you, for those who don't have. And he says, why? Listen to his rationale. Who created the universe?
Hashem.
Hashem. Who created the people? Hashem. If you create someone, you bring a baby to the world. Can you say, not my responsibility? Let him find milk. Let him find bread. You know where you go. Take the baby away from you. They say, I'm sorry, you can't serve as a parent. If God created, if this is his world, he's the one who supports us. He's the one who sustains us. It's his responsibility. It's his duty. He's got to do it, and he's doing it. But how does it? The way he does it, for some people, he sends them a direct deposit, meaning they found a good job and they make a living and they are supporting themselves, meaning they support themselves, but their work with God help them to find. For other people, they are less fortunate. And God did put aside money for them. But you know where he put it? In your pocket. You are the Gabai Tzedakah. You are in charge of distributing what God wants to provide for them through your accomplishments. So you imagine is basically that the money that belongs to that person is being kept as a collateral, as a security by you until you're going to provide it for the person in need. Because it's not really yours. You are God's messenger to give this money for the one who is in need. Says the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, that's what the Torah means. Im kesef, if there is money by you. Im kesef, if you have money, more than what you need. Talveh tami, then it's meant that you should lend it for those who are less fortunate. By the way, the Ibn Ezra says exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Im kesef, period, is the money. Talveh sami. It meant that you should go to distribute it and to lending others. So they should be able to support themselves and mainly try to put themselves on their own feet. Esa'ani imoch, it translates. The poor person is with you. What does it mean with you? The poor person's share is with you, is by you. That's the point of the poor person. Ani mach is with you because his share is by you. It ended up in your account. It ended up in your mailbox. But it really is. That's why it says Ani imach. It is his because God is the one who provides it. And God created two types of people. People are being tested. One is being tested with the test of being rich, and somebody else is being tested with the test of being poor. The test of the one being rich is, am I going to spend my richness the way the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh tells me I should spend it? I should go and lend people money, help them to support themselves and to sustain themselves. This is their challenge. The poor person also is challenged. If he's poor, he has to beg, he has to ask, he has to look around. He's not the one who has. Everybody wants to be in the giving aisle. I acknowledge it, it's fine. But God, as we're going to see soon, this is actually a Gemara. We're going to discuss in a moment. But this is the way the Ohr HaChaim translates the verse. Im kesef. If you have extra money that somebody else doesn't have, talveh tami. Lend it to my people. Why? Because I saw ani. What the poor person deserves getting by God, imach, is with you. It's in your pocket. Remember once being at a dinner, And the one leading the fundraising got up there and he said, there is good news and there is bad. The good news is that we have all the money. We made it. The bad news is that it's in your pockets. Now, for you to make the choice. And now we understand what the term is, lending it to my people. The Torah gives us a very clear message. Those poor people are my people. And because they are my people, I am the one who is responsible to provide for them. Don't you understand? And if I'm letting you have more than what you need because I am providing them through you, you are my partner. You are my partner. As long as you act like a partner, I'm happy to be in business with you. Somebody once, a true story about the Rebbe. Anyway, make a long story short, a guy who had a store in Israel, and he did, fairly okay, and he made sure to give 10% to tzedakah. And then he was able to expand 2 stores, and he still gave 10% to tzedakah. And to 3 stores, and eventually purchased a building, and the building developed into a mall. Now 10% is not anymore $1,000, $2,000. The 10% ended up being in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then it becomes a little difficult to give up. And you start to find tzedakah deductions and deals. When can I give and what am I getting back? And slowly the business is not going as well. And he came to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says, listen, God has a big job. His job is he needs to provide for the entire world. He's looking for partners to help him support the world. You were chosen to be a partner. The way you conducted yourself, you gave 10% to the store. He said, you know what? It's a good investment. Let me give him a second store. So he's going to provide for 10 more people. It's working. Let me give him a third store. So now 50 people are going to be provided for me, from God. What I need to do is doing the job for me. So why not? It works. It's a very fair deal. He gets, my people that I need to take care of get. There is kindness in the world, all works. No, one day, suddenly you're starting to funfair around with the partnership. God looks down and says, okay, sorry. I need partners. I don't have time to waste. It doesn't work with you. Let me find somebody else. Let me find somebody else. What should I do? Nothing against you, but he needs partners. He needs hands to deliver the goods for him. Are you ready to be a shaliach, a messenger? Then you eat. Not? Sorry. Chassidus, and we learned a little last Shabbat. How long was it? David was there. In the morning on Shabbat, we learn Chassidut before davening, usually around 10 to 9. We start, forced to start. And we're learning Hasidic insight. We actually learned this idea from a Hasidic point of view. There is a famous medrash on this week's Parsha. Im kesef talveh tami. Says the medrash as follows. Amar David lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Medrash Tanchuma. David, King David tells God, Master of the world and deal, the medrash paraphrases the verse in Tehillim, chapter 61. Yeshev olam lifnei Elokim. Let the world be smooth, settled before you. Why do you have people who are rich, and then you have people who are poor? Why can't everybody be equal? Meaning, if you are anyway providing through me, it's you, right? Why do you have to do it through me? Give a direct deposit. Today, in one button, what does Bill Gates do? Or used to do? I think he sits down and signs 50,000 checks. There's a one account, one button. In a second, everybody got his deposit on the first of the month, whatever way it works. I'm sure he's not signing 50,000 checks. David, does it sign 50,000 checks? I don't think
His hand.
Exactly. It works in a system. There is a system. So the question is, David HaMelech says, Yeshev olam lifnei Elokim. Let the world be so equally. Why do you have to take loans from me? Why do you have looking for partners and you get frustrated? Am I doing a good job? If I'm not doing a good job, then you have to look for a second partner. Lo sachab, leave it all. Let everybody have. What does the Medrash say? David HaMelech, King David, turns to God and he uses the paraphrase, Chesed ve'emet man imtzeru. If everybody will get equally, who will keep up the attribute of kindness? God says, you think I only want people to be supported? I have a bigger agenda. I also need people to act kind to others. And if everybody else has everything, and we are all on the same level, so who will be able to ever exercise chesed, kind? I can do it. In order to have chesed in the world, I need to make someone poor and someone rich. So then we can see how the rich comes over to the poor and he provides them with something, the poor receives. And like I said, we can all, and it's kosher to beg by God, put me in the aisle of the givers, okay? But at least the perspective is that this is what God wants. Chassidus comes with that question, he says, why? Why is it so important to be kind? Yes, if there are poor people, then it's important that the rich provide for the poor. But if you, God, can make everybody equal, so who cares whether there's kindness or not? There is no need for kindness. Everybody has everything. There is a need when somebody doesn't have, so we have to act kind. But if there's no need, so just to create a scenario in order to be able to give someone the opportunity to be kind, doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. What's the point? What's the point? Especially the Gemara uses the same discussion. The Gemara says, Malve Hashem choinen dal. God becomes a creditor to somebody who provides the poor. God owes me money and I give somebody else money. What does he have to go into that? Provide. Chassidus come with a very delicate, deep concept. It's a Kabbalistic concept that the way God created the world, not only this world, the higher world, the spiritual world, the universe, is the way God works, the way everything works is in a system of giver and receiver, mashpia and mekabel. Even in the names of God, God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei represents the giving aspect of God. Elokim is the receiving aspect of God. Chochmah gives to Bina. Chesed gives to Gvura. Each one gives the other, and that's how creation evolves. The spiritual angels, the Sphirot, everything works in the system of Mashpia or Mekabel, giver and receiver. This is the secret of creation. Says the Alter Rebbe, we all know there is many sources in Torah which teach us that whatever happens above is generated by the way we act below. God works as a reflection to us. Right? Da mala mimcha. Whatever is above comes from you. Zog der Alter Rebbe, everything which happens above depends on us. So in order to have the system of giving and receiving working properly in the higher world, in the spiritual world, God needs us to act properly as givers and receivers. And when we are acting as givers and receivers, then it channels up there that the system cannot get plugged up or canceled, and then is how the world can continue functioning as givers and receivers. Another word, which is a very, very interesting concept. The Rebbe once spoke about it. I saw it in a 1962 Fabregen Mishpatim. The Rebbe asked a philosophical question. God provides everybody? Right. Is it possible for a person to behave in a way that God does not want to provide them? Yes. So when you see someone in need, maybe he messed up and God doesn't want to give them. Why are you interfering and providing for somebody who might be cut off the line? Especially if you give him a loan and you're expecting to get paid back, he might never pay you back because he is out based on his behavior. The fact that he doesn't have should be a sign to you that he's not behaving, God is not providing him. So the Rebbe, it's a wrong approach. Because it's not that God doesn't provide because somebody messed up and that's why he doesn't provide. There is a bigger chance that it's God he doesn't have because God put him in the line of receivers in order to keep up the system of givers and receivers. And he was selected to be on that line, on that row of receivers. Nothing to do with his sins, nothing. He can be the best person. He can be a tzaddik. He can be Rav Zusha of Anipoli. But he was very poor. He had to be in the receiving reality of society. While somebody else was in the giving reality. Don't sit and look. You're interfering with God. He just threw him out of the house and you take him in. He didn't throw him out of the house anything. This is the system. This is exactly how the system works. The system works that there's a mashpia and there's a mekabel. There's a giver and there's a receiver, and that's how creation works from day one. This is what Chassidus says. It's basically, you look at the world, that basically we're all acting like partners. Like partners. We both have a mission. You lend someone money, the guy borrows money. It's a partnership. That's how it works. One of the partners is made not to have, the other partner is meant to have, and we are sharing the partnership in fulfilling the meaning of creation by having the lender giving the borrower what he needs and the borrower paying it back and continuing as follows. When you have that attitude, that understanding, you can imagine that you view loans in a whole different perspective. It's not anymore, I'm lending someone money, what's going to happen? I'm never going to see it. All nervous, sleepless nights. Don't worry. You are meant to lend and he's meant to give it back to you. This is we just figured out the name of the game. Okay? This is the name of the game. The Torah says, Kesef Talmud, this is what the Rechaim, the Rebbe Nezra, that's what they all say. You're giving someone what belongs to him because God wants it to be in that type of system of receivers and givers. The Rebbe once said that the Tzemach Tzedek had Hasidim where they used to go give loans and take loans, not because they needed the money, just for the heck of it. And you wonder, what kind of game is that taking loans and giving loans? Now we understand. They wanted to activate the giving and receiving aspect in Shamayim, in heaven. How do we do it? Can I give you a loan? I don't need it. Please take a loan. You look at me, what do you need it? You know why I need it. I need it because I want up deal. Should be some giving, some more chesed. But the Alter Rebbe, there was a special kind of system that they never called even tzedakah. They didn't call it charity. They called it loan. A guy came in to collect money. He said, "Oh, let's organize a loan for him." It meant tzedakah, but they called it a loan. A guy came from Israel. Oh, somebody, let's give him a loan. The idea, the approach was that he uses an expression. The shtickle broid was Hashem hat mir gegeben ist daran dein heilig euch. Which means in Yiddish, the piece of bread that God gave me, your share, your part is in that piece of bread of mine. And that's what I'm giving you. The Alter Rebbe got married. Before he went to the chuppah, he had a condition. You know what this condition was? He was a young man. He was younger than 18. He was 15 years old when he got married. The condition was that the in-laws cannot interfere in the nidunya, the gift of money that he gets from his in-laws. They have no saying in the matter what he does with that. Otherwise, he's not going down to the aisle. No, they had no choice. They gave in to it. You know what he did? No, they didn't give it away. Right after the chasana, he made a fund to lend money, especially to people who are going to work the earth, become farmers. Then it was the czar. It became difficult to live in the big cities, giving Jews opportunities to go work the farming land, like Chasson, which is now in the news. That was one of the early Hasidic establishment by the Mittel Rebbe to work the earth. Kolchozim. He made a funding, he made a loan. And this is the mitzvah of Girls Chassan. I'm going to finish up tonight with two stories. And I have a third story, but the third story I'm only going to say Shabbos by the Kiddush. Those are going to be here. You're going to have the privilege to hear the third story. Sorry, I know you're coming from a far place, but I got to keep some goodies for those who come here on Shabbat too. And I'm trying to encourage, maybe it's going to help you to move closer to truth. But anyway, so you're going to get both, a story and Shalom. Okay, no pressure, as they say in English. So this is the story, two stories. First of all, we know that having a free loan association is something which Jewish communities had in the establishment of them as a community. Here in Seattle even, there is an organization called Hebrew Free Loan, which is older than 120 years, probably from the oldest organizations in town. And it was organized to help people stand on their feet. The immigrants who came to town and they needed money to start jobs. I actually read once about it. A number of Jews got together because apparently they couldn't get loans from the regular channels. And actually, there's somebody, a Schneider. Maybe it's related to you. Take a look. Maybe it's to Zayda. Yeah, you go on the website of Hebrew Free Loan of Seattle. They have the history and they have pictures of the founders of the Hebrew Free Loan. And I checked it out, as a matter of fact, yesterday. And I saw a name Schneider, maybe C. Schneider or something. Whatever. Take a look. There's pictures. Might be one of you people. Either way, even when I came to Seattle in 1994, I didn't come as an immigrant, but I came to work as a teacher, and my in-laws weren't, taking care of me fully. I got a job. My wife got a job, and I needed to buy a car, and the car cost $2,000. I didn't have extra $2,000. You know where I went? Rabbi Kornfeld told me there is an organization in town called Hebrew Free Loan. And they're going to probably lend you the money. I went and they gave me a loan. I paid $100 a month back with no interest. In 2 years, I paid off my car. Happens to be the car got broken 2 weeks after I bought it. There was the engine something. But anyway, he was the guarantor. Rabbi Kornfeld was the guarantor. He needed a guarantor. A Seattle organization. In New York, there is an organization called Shomrei Shabbat, Free Loan Association, because those who know the story in the 30s and in the 20s, and maybe even in the early 40s, if you did not work on Shabbat, you lost your job. and you had to support people to be able to stand on their own feet and to start a job again. And until they found a job, they needed a loan. And that was the organization that every single year they used to have a Malka at the end of Shabbat Mishpatim. And that was from the only people that used to get up in the middle. The Rabbi used to invite the Rabbi of that organization, Rabbi Gordon first, later his son-in-law, Rabbi Goldman. And now it's being led by his son-in-law, the Sofer, which comes here to town sometimes to write a Torah, Rabbi Moshe Klein, is leading that fund. Basically, the way the fund works, people put their money, instead of sitting in the bank, they're putting money into this fund, so they're not losing it. The principle is there. And like I spoke to him this week, he tells me if they call it back, I think 2 weeks or 3 days, they get back their money. But meantime, their money circulates in helping others. They never lose the principle. No threat. Because people usually give it back. It's called the Shomer Shabbos law. Anyway, story number 1 is a story that the Rebbe writes in his book of letters. There's a letter, we have over, I believe 30-something volumes of the Rebbe's letters, more to come out. So I saw a letter there. Somebody who ended up, I guess, with a bundle of money. This is in the 50s. And he asked the Rebbe, what should he do with that? And he offers 2 options. Option number 1 is to take his family to Israel. In the 50s, there was the largest sum of money to take your entire family to Israel, or to buy a Torah for the synagogue. The Rebbe responds, not this and not that. What should you do with your money? If you ask me, invest it in a free loan organization so it can be used to help people with loans so they can stand on their feet. But the second story is an unbelievable story that I Rebbe spoke about it on tape. 1964, the 20th of Av, which is the 20th yard site of the Rebbe's father, the Levi Yitzchak. The Rebbe says a story. I received a check of $5,000. 1964, $5,000. It's like what today? About.
It's like a year's salary at that.
Okay, let's say it's for sure $100,000 today. $5,000, 1964 is at least $100,000 today, if not. Right? The Rebbe says this lady writes me a letter. And what does she say? In the letter, she says that she was owed by someone for a long time, $5,000. And after many, many years, I just received my $5,000 back. I realized if I did not get the money till now and I was able to survive, I guess I don't need it. I want you to have it and decide what you ever want to do with it, it's yours. But the Rebbe says, this is what I decided I'm going to do with it. There are school teachers who get paid, but they get, what do you call it? Data checks. What do you call it? Post-data checks. The school doesn't have money every month, but they have to pay the teacher. So you were supposed to get paid on January 29. They gave you a check on January 29, but the date of the check is next year, January 29. Go figure. They hope by then they're going to make their money. That's how they. But the Rebbe says teachers need to make a living. For them to be successful in their teaching, they have to know that their families are being provided. So I am taking this $5,000. I'm not going to spend it. I'm not building another Chabadas with that. I'm not buying no Torahs with that. I am opening with that a special fund, which is going to be used specially to pick up those post-dated checks of the teachers so they can get the monthly payment ahead of time of when their check is going to be materialized, and they should be able to leave count. And the Rebbe said, $5,000 is not enough for the amount of teachers. So I'm just announcing the establishment of such a free loan organization. And I ask the people over here who want to join me in participating to give up money that they have, but they don't spend, they're extra, so we can help lending, not giving, lending money to teachers who are living with post-dated fees. And then there's another very good story, which happened to me personally. And I was 11 years old. But that's going to be between the herring and the cholent chops. David is going to remind me that I have to say that story. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the class. We learned about the mitzvah, Chasadim, stories of tzaddikim. Learned the story here in the Parsha. May Hashem help that we just strengthen us. By the way, giving alone is not only money. You can lend someone time. You can lend someone knowledge. And you can give it to somebody, a Hasidic Jew once told me, he gives a loan. And he says he likes giving loans. He says, because I will tell you the truth, he says, when I give a loan to someone, I'm for sure doing a mitzvah. Why? Either he pays me back, then I did the mitzvah of lending. If he doesn't pay me back, I did the mitzvah of charity.
It's equal to 50,000.
Oh, we just figured out that 5,000 in 1960 is equal to $50,000 now. Exactly how this calculation works. There's going to be a special class by Ken Craven at some point in the history. Thank you.
How to use a cell phone. Rabbi.
We use that by Google. Thank you very much. Let me just say there's some guys over here. Say hello to everybody.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. How are we doing? Good to see you. Who do I see over here? I see Arnold. I see our friends from Illinois. I see Yovan. And I see who is the other person? Ruthie Hudson. Oh, very nice. I wish you all a wonderful good night. Looking forward to see you again.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Rabbi.
Historic.
We got a announcement for presidential.
Good night.
Good
Thank you.